Hey, well, today I'm angry at the mess we find ourselves in, and I'm talking specifically about the fact that this pandemic has crushed all of us individuals, cities, states, and the federal government. Now, I know most of us have been focused on our own personal situation. Those of us who've been getting $600 a week help from the federal government, those of us who've been unemployed, I'm sure that's been very valuable. Those of us who have employees, this payroll protection plan has helped. It's enabled us to keep paying employee salaries for at least 2.5 months. All of that has ended. The money for unemployment, gone. The payroll protection money, gone. And now companies have no reason to keep these employees hired. Not only that, with the advent of broadband, companies have realized that employees don't need to come into the office anymore. And why would you send someone on an international or long distance flight for a business meeting when they can have 20 Zoom meetings in that time or more at no cost? I think everything is going to change. And the biggest problem for the cities is they are not prepared for it. So let's look at New York and let's look at what New York's reaction has been. First, this is the population of New York. And when I say this is, I mean this was. The population of New York 2019, a little over 8 million people. What is the budget for New York City? This is New York City we're talking about. The budget is $88 billion. That is $10,000 per person. Do you really think every New Yorker is getting $10,000 worth of services? I doubt it. And you know what? The problem is they've just realized that they doubt it too. They don't think it's going to be happening, and they are leaving. People are leaving New York City in droves. And this applies also to Chicago, San Francisco, LA, all of these big cities where it costs a fortune to live. Now, why do people pay a fortune to live in New York? 3 main reasons. Primarily, job opportunities, culture, restaurants. The first is no longer valid. Job opportunities, you don't have to go to New York to work for a New York company anymore. They're quite happy to hire you elsewhere as long as you can do the work remotely. And companies are learning that their employees can do the work remotely. What about culture? Theaters are closed. There is no widespread culture, group gatherings. That's gone. One of the major reasons to be in New York is gone. What's the third? Restaurants. What kind of restaurant experience does one have in New York now? People pay a fortune to live in a tiny apartment in these cities, New York, San Francisco, Chicago, because of the perceived value of being in a thriving metropolitan area. This is now being viewed in reverse. People are fleeing in droves. You may think, oh my goodness, this is going to come back. He's a Chicken Little. People are not going to come back. People have realized not only are they not getting the services for which they pay dearly in New York, but there's no timetable for when those services will return. And at any moment, you might be told that you are confined to your tiny little apartment. It's one thing to show up to your tiny apartment in New York to go to sleep. It's another thing to spend 24 hours a day there. That's when you start thinking about the bucolic open ranges of Wyoming. Maybe even interacting with bison is less fraught with danger than running across armed sign painters in New York going on a rampage. These things are all possible now. People are leaving these cities and they may never come back. But the bigger issue is these cities are in no way prepared for this. If you think that the individuals in this country are going to be suffering because of no unemployment and no payroll protection, you haven't seen anything yet compared to the suffering that these cities and states are about to undergo. New York just cut its budget from $93 billion to $88 billion. Good luck, New York. That's not even a drop in the bucket. I mean, if you think that the tax revenue, the city revenue, is going to drop by 10% or less in New York, you are crazy. Restaurants have closed. I'll give you an example. One restaurant closes. All the companies that used to supply food to that restaurant, no longer. All the people who used to work at that restaurant, no longer. Linen supply, plumbers. There's no end to the people who are affected by every business closing, and these businesses are closing by the tens of thousands. never to reopen. I mean, it's not as if you can close a business down, 6 months later return and reopen it. You're bankrupted by then. You can't afford to pay rent for 6 months. And if your landlord allows you to tack those 6 months of rent on to the end of the lease, good luck. How are you going to pay that? People are abandoning these big cities, and the big cities have no concept of the hurricane that's bearing down upon them. New York has just cut $5 billion out of $93 billion. New York needs to cut $25 billion out of its budget just to have a hope. Good luck. There's no way. We're watching the slow erosion, now rapidly accelerating, of the major cities in this country. This COVID-19 epidemic, the worst thing that it did was expose the fact that you don't need to be in a major metropolitan city anymore to have job opportunity. And if you don't have culture or restaurants, why pay a fortune to live in a tiny box? People are understanding that. They're leaving the states, the cities, have no idea what's coming and are not prepared. It's going to be spectacular to watch. I'm glad I'm not in a big city. I hope you aren't either. Good luck. Please, let's wake up.